everybody. Very warm welcome to you. You're listening to The Music Business Buddy with me, Johnny Amos, podcasting out of Birmingham in England. I'm the author of the book, The Music Business for Music Creators, available in hardback, paperback, ebook format. I'm a music creator, a songwriter and a producer. I am a senior lecturer in both music creation and music business. Wherever you are, whatever you do, please consider yourself welcome to this podcast and to a part of this community. I'm here to educate and inspire, hopefully anyway, music creators from all over the world in their quest to achieving their goals by understanding the business behind music. Okay, so the focus for today is artist development. Now, this is a big subject, right? This is a really, really big subject because artists are constantly faced with questions like, who are you? Where do you fit in the landscape of the music industry? What is your sound, etc., etc.? And that's not just from labels or publishers or producers or whoever. It's journalists, it's PR people, it's bloggers, it's content creators, it's all sorts of people. And then ultimately, of course, the fan base. In order for an artist to be able to directly appeal to a fan base, whether it's mainstream or niche or whatever it is, people have to understand who the artist is, what's their message, what is their music about, what do they represent. That's a lot of stuff, right? And it's very rare, if not completely unseen, for an artist to be fully developed very, very early on in their career. It takes time, right? And so, what is it that helps to define a recording artist? Perhaps it's genre definition or cultural, stylistic, technological traits of their music. Maybe it's the values that they hold, the message in their music. I know every song is different, but maybe if we look at a lot of successful artists, their early body of their work was conceptual, it's cohesive, it had some kind of meaning to it that resonated with a lot of people. What about an artist's sonic identity? How do they go about finding that? What about their branding? What about their image? I'm running out of breath. We need an expert. Now I'm going to level with you, everybody. When it came to deciding to do an episode on this very important subject, there was a lot of people I could turn to. But my favourite person, the number one person that I wanted to pick for this, was a lady called Sarah Nagorny from Glassbeat Music in New York City. She is one of the most impressive people I've ever met in the music industry. She's a good example for females in the music industry. In fact, no, more than that, she's a good example for absolutely everybody in the music industry. Sarah is a songwriter. She is also an artist development strategist. And when I say strategist, I mean everything. So she's an incredible songwriter. She's got a list of huge credits. Feel free to Google her, Sarah Nagorny, have a look at all the people that she's written for. And it's not just from, artists from many moons ago. She's got loads of editorial support. She's got her finger on the pulse of exactly what is going on in the landscape of the music industry in the 2020s. She works from the ground up by kind of working with artists at a very, very, very early on in their career, helping them to kind of shape their sound, figure out what kind of songs they need in their catalogue, what their live setup should look like, and then shopping them, and taking them to the right record companies or to publishers or to be working in the room with the right producers. She's not somebody that's, scared of jumping on a plane and flying to somewhere else completely, and going, right, okay, this should happen and that should happen. And she's brave, she's courageous, she's an amazing songsmith. And I've witnessed firsthand what she's like in the room. A few years ago, when I first met her, I was in New York. I was in a session co-writing with an artist that Sarah was developing, and I was mesmerised by what Sarah does in a room, not just as a writer, but just steering the direction of the whole purpose of a song and how it works for the artist, where it ends up, what role it can play. She is just amazing from start to finish, from getting before we've even kind of started with the song to then getting it over the finish line and finding its audience and getting it some great DSP editorial support and just helping the artist to develop and find their sound. So anyway, enough from me. I've done a fantastic little interview with Sarah where she's talked really openly, especially about a duo she's working with right now that I know she's been going to Nashville quite regularly to work with. It took me a few weeks to kind of try and sit down with Sarah and find the right time because she is so active, she's so busy. But anyway, I will play the interview now. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll check back in with you at the end.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to do this.
Oh, no, gosh, not at all. The honour is mine, Sarah. Okay, so the first question, there's 5 questions. First question, what attributes do you look for when considering if you would like to work with an emerging artist?
I think the most important thing for me when I check somebody out is their point of view. I think there's nothing there's nothing like having a unique point of view. You can write lots of good songs, but if it's not from a perspective that's unique to you or unique to the artist, then it's not going to get through. There's a lot of noise. There's so much product out there. The last, I've worked with a lot of different artists. One that I worked with for quite a while, with him, he was just such a ridiculous musician at 18. And he would pick up a didgeridoo that he'd never seen before. And in, a couple of minutes, he'd figure out how to play it. And he had this cool voice. So, I mean, things like that also. He was 18, so his point of view wasn't really developed yet. With some other artists I've worked with, the thing is, helping them capture it. Even if I hear it, they may not know that that's the point of view that's going to cut through the noise, But I think that's like an important thing. I made some notes for myself. And I also really want at least the germ of a good songwriter. They don't have to be fully formed, but it's better if there's someone who either makes notes in a notebook or has little licks in the morning and I think this is a good idea, and chords, ideas, work ethic, huge one on the list, gigantic. Some people are just oozing with talent, but they don't work that hard, and some people might not have as much talent, and they're out there in the world, really famous people. They're talented enough, shall we say, but they work like the dickens. They just work so hard. And I think if I see that someone really has that focus and willingness to kill and go for it, I think that's a really big thing. Just writing a love song. There's so many love songs out there, but one of the artists I worked with wrote about breaking up with a friend, which I thought was kind of unique. I mean, it's been done, but it was kind of fun. It wasn't just writing about a guy. It was writing about a best friend. And I thought that's kind of a fresh way to look at a breakup, So things like that, like slightly different outlooks on what's typical. And I think, I would really like, and it doesn't always happen, to see a great performer. I would say in Nashville, the great news is they perform all the time down there. It's made very easy for them. There's at least 50 venues in that smallish city. And they can play in these little dumps to get their act together all the time. I think London's like that. It's got a lot of little venues. New York has become terrible, by the way. It's terrible. Most of the clubs have closed. It's crazy.
Oh, really? In the Village as well? There's not some...
Well, yeah, there's a couple of the old ones, the Bitter End and, Lion's Den or whatever on Bleecker Street. There was the Rockwood, and there were 3 Rockwoods, and only one of them remains. Now, Brooklyn's become much better. It's got a lot more venues now than Manhattan does. But for some reason, live music just didn't make enough money for people or something. So they closed a lot of the venues. But anyway, so I would just say being a good performer, at least having the willingness to work and hone your live show. Because if I meet someone when they're 18, they may not have had that much experience,
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, speaking of, youngsters, early career artists, there's a tendency sometimes for them to create music that is similar to the music creators that inspire them, the artists, the writers, the producers that inspire them to want to make music. But at what point can an artist begin to find their own style? Is that a problem that you come across? For instance, I often kind of say to an artist, this is what inspired you and got you here, but we need to get you not necessarily away from that, but we need to springboard from it into this new area so we can find where you sit. How do you handle that, and is it something that you come across?
It is a difficult one. I mean, just looking at some famous people, Dylan listened to Woody and Hank Williams and Elvis. Obviously, he didn't imitate them at all. He had his own sound right away. Springsteen, I just looked some of these ideas up. Roy Orbison, Chuck Berry, Dylan, the Beatles. Obviously, once again, I think that it's sort of hardwired. I do think imitating before you can create is real, but it is hard for some people to let go of sounding like Mariah Carey or whatever. And I think it is going to get in your way if you don't sort of wake up in the morning being you in a way.
Yeah.
And I think, I think it's hard. I mean, I feel there's some artists that, like one that I worked with for a while, he just had his own sound right from the get-go. I know he had heroes, but his voice was so unique. And I think some artists do sound similar to others. There is kind of a movement right now, this kind of sad girl pop thing going on, and they do all sound kind of similar. So where the uniqueness may happen is in the production or in the storyline. But I mean, I think it is a problem. A lot of people do sound, there is a lot of similarity between people right now. And I think certainly in country, I listen to some of these records and I can't tell the difference between these artists. So yeah, I think just answering that question, I think the good ones really have their own voice right early on. And they don't take voice lessons. Sorry, vocal teachers out there, but a lot of the time, the people that I work with who've had voice lessons from age 10 or something, like me, it does kind of smooth out all the things that make you unique. And voice lessons are wonderful, but it's really a good idea to hold off and get your unique sound together first, and then get the voice lessons a little bit later once you're kind of you. At least that's what I've found to be true. It's like a lot of theater singers, they get a lot of training early on and they have amazing skill, but they're not it's hard to find a distinctive sound between them, often.
Well, maybe is that perhaps because the teachings, the style of teaching is standardized and not so much customized. Therefore, it's difficult to kind of find that uniqueness if you're taught in the same way as a lot of other people, perhaps.
Could be. I think, though, that like if you're doing scales, and I don't want, again, take nothing away. I was a vocal coach. From vocal coaching, it's very important, but it does often happen early when someone has talent, and sometimes it smooths out all the rough edges, which could make them sound more distinctive.
Interesting.
That I have noticed. I mean, for example, the guy I worked for a long time, he didn't have a voice lesson until he was like 20, or maybe I gave him his first voice lesson. What a cool voice he had, with all the flaws and everything.
Right. Okay. And so then at that stage, once you started to work on his vocals with him, was it more about kind of preserving it rather than correcting it?
Stamina, intonation, being able to sing in front of a rock band, which is a big project. It's hard to be heard over a drummer behind your head. You're doing these little rooms. They're not up on stage behind glass. They're like right behind your head, as you know. So it's a hard thing to learn how. It's like an inner sense of pitch to know how the voice, sounds without maybe exactly hearing yourself as well as you should. Of course, in-ear technology is really useful too. That wasn't around when I was a performer, which I wanted to mention. I did perform for many years. Yeah,
okay. So, Sarah, you've just mentioned something really interesting there about kind of you've got your performance background, all the songwriting, all the development work you do, but you've just mentioned something that I've completely taken for granted until this moment, which is the ability to be able to sort of sing over or with a band. I started doing that as a teenager, and I never knew any different, and so I don't really have a base of comparison from my own perspective, but that's a thing, right? That's a big problem for a lot of vocalists.
Really, a number of vocalists I've worked with really had a problem with it because they sound beautiful, they record beautifully, and then they have to get up in front of a loud band, and it's very hard because they don't have the experience, really. And you started young. For example, we talk more about this duo I'm working with in Nashville. Both of them have been singing live, it seems like, since they were infants, because I just did a festival with them. They had 8 gigs in 3 days. And their voices were tired. They were doing 1-hour shows like 3 times a day at different venues. But they're troopers. I mean, they didn't have any problem. I mean, they didn't have a drummer behind them, but sometimes they couldn't hear themselves. But their pitch was awesome. And I know if you put a drummer behind it, it wouldn't make any difference. But they started young.
Okay, so that's well. I mean, let's use the duo that you mentioned there as a case study, if it's okay with you. So, one of the things that one of the age-old sort of problems, if you will, in artist development is having an artist, find their sound. And there's people find it in different ways through experimentation or trial and error or process of elimination or just whatever it might be for different people. But, how have you kind of taken that approach with the duo that you're working with right now, for example? Have they, would you say they've developed their sound yet? Is it an ongoing thing, or because it's only something that has to kind of be present for their first era of their career, right? They can evolve after that, but that initial period of launching an artist, hey, this is what this artist does. Do you find that? How do you develop and find that sound with them? Is that through arrangement and production, or is it through songwriting, or through something else?
I really think it's all of the above. I mean, I think sometimes people are great players, and that's their, like a John Mayer, that's his thing. And he also has a cool sounding voice. Sometimes being a great player is a handicap because you're so into being like a virtuoso. It kind of overrides the artist, singing artist thing. And with the duo, it's early days. We started writing a few months ago. They did their first gigs in the Montauk Festival, which was this past weekend, May 16 to 19. We're going to go in the studio in July, and I'm really bringing in someone I trust a lot who has had a lot of experience. He's from New York, but he's been living in Nashville for 30 years. He was Keith Urban's guitarist and musical director for many years. So he's got a kid from the Bronx who's got the ears for all music. But he, when I say I want to do a mix of Zach Bryan, Daisy Jones and the Six, and Sheryl Crow, it makes perfect sense to him because that's kind of what I think is the lane of this band. But I think finding a sound is often, and I think, by the way, they're on their way with their instincts, my instincts, and the people I'm bringing in. And I'll play that to you later. But I'd say with some other artists, like the younger ones, it's often more of a challenge because, again, they're imitating, they're listening to, some rock band, McFly or whatever, that they listened to when they were kids and they want to sound like that. Getting them out of that and into their own skin can be a challenge. And sometimes a huge challenge, with another artist I work with, it was very much about production. This other artist was very good at recording themselves. And that helps. By the way, I recommend that everyone learn how to record their own vocals. Big, big thing to know how to do. Because if you're always going to the studio and waiting for somebody to record your vocals, it's, you could do a guitar vocal at home or someone could send you a track to sing to, but you have so much more control over what you're doing on the mic and how you're coming across, and trial and error at home for hours is so much better than being with a red light on, sing a vocal 3 times, thank you very much, goodbye, right?
Very good point.
You know what I mean?
It's something I talk about a lot, Sarah, as well, to a lot of different people. Just purely because it's so much easier to be able to achieve that these days, right? And there's less commercial recording studios than there's ever been before. There's more remote technology than there's ever been before. It's kind of a no-brainer in some ways, isn't it? It's just that the advantages of being able to self-record as a vocalist, and it's the comfort thing as well, right? Being able to be at home with your favourite lamp on or whatever it is that works for you. No brainer.
It's a great thing. And also, I think you just get to be better. I mean, you can hear your intonation. You could say, no, I meant to sing it with a little more air. You're not in front of somebody who's, tapping their fingers like, hurry up and let's get this done. I'm saying that's how people are, but you know what I mean? If you're in a studio, everyone's time is valuable. If you can, it's so easy now, buy a decent mic can you get a decent mic for £300 or £400, right?
Oh yeah.
Or even less. I mean, I have a what's it called? A Blue little bill.
Oh,
It sounds pretty good. It's $100.
wow.
So just to record at home, but just get good at it. You could do it with GarageBand in your Mac, just to learn the skill.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of honing your own sound, talking about, having a direction, it's hugely important because you can really work on the way that your vocals come across. My most recent artist I was working with, she always recorded her own vocals, almost 9 out of 10 times. And I think it made a huge difference because she really hugged the mic and she understood how to make her sound unique because she spent so much time doing it by herself.
That's interesting. So that vocalist that you mentioned there, was she just recording a dry sound, or was she kind of doing some edits and post-production herself and kind of doing that part of it as well?
I think mostly just putting down sections, but because one time she did something for me when I was studying audio engineering and sent me like 400 pieces of vocal. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with all of this. And then I gave it to a friend of mine. I was like, could you clean this up? But, she's used to working with pros who piece it all together. But I think, it's just a great thing to know how to do. And it'll help you develop your sound a lot. And it doesn't cost very much.
Yeah. It's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. Sarah, just thinking on the same subject there of this kind of, of an artist kind of finding their sound. The question is often, how do you know when you get there, right? It's like, has an artist kind of found their initial early career sound because they've released something and it's got some traction online and there's some editorial support on Spotify or whatever? Or is it a moment where an artist kind of says, do you know what, this really feels like me and I'm really comfortable? Like, at what point do you know that sound has been found?
I think it's both things that you said. I mean, a few artists I've worked with have had a lot of editorial support. And one artist I'm thinking about, who I think should be going a more artistic direction, and she keeps coming back to this pop thing. And I've known her for a long time. I'm like, don't do that. What makes you is very, very cool and arty. Don't try to be Dua Lipa. It's funny. But even artists that I've known and are excellent and really have a sound, sometimes they struggle admitting to themselves that they already know who they are. Because they want to be more successful or more pop or something. I think I'm getting away from your question a little.
No. That's it.
I think it's all of the above. I think, and some of them have had a lot of editorial support, which helps tremendously, of course, to say, oh, this is working. With my duo, and I don't want to say too much about it, but I've been pretty quiet, trying to get it developed. I don't really Nashville's a small town, but I took it to like couple of in the know people who I trust to keep it under their hat. And they went like, holy moly, this is something new. I don't think anybody's doing anything like this. And that was kind of like, cool, because that town has something called the Row. Have you heard about it?
Oh, yes.
It's Music Row, so I went to these guys on the Row and they said, oh, so well, you can edit this out, whatever. They were like, and they started telling me the bands that have been around in the past, and there ain't nobody doing this now. And I felt like without putting it out too far, I just got some big people to go, I think you got something going. And that's, of course, lucky because I've been in the business so long, I can get that kind of feedback, right? But for younger artists, I think you can take it to your friends, trusted people that you think, some of my artists will play it to better known writers or something and say, which of these 5 songs should I release? And sometimes they put it on Instagram and they'll go, hey guys, I've got these 3 songs. Which do you vote that I put out next? I think it's great to go to your audience and ask their opinion. So these are all ways to get feedback,
Yeah, good point.
And people, if you have a decent Instagram following, and I don't mean giant, it could be 5,000 or 8,000 or whatever, you can people will give you feedback. You'll go, no, that song's more you, or, oh, put that one out second. Or we're actually going to put something out on Instagram for a title of a song that myself and the artists, the duo, are disagreeing on the title. I have a more pop title. And they said, okay, we'll put it up on Instagram and see what people think. I think it's actually cool. It's like, let's get people's opinion. Like, oh, yeah, that's a stupid title. Oh, I much prefer that title. You can go to your audience and ask opinions. I think that's a really cool thing about social media, that you can provided you feel you're in a safe environment, like you're not, TikTok, maybe TikTok, but Instagram seems to me a little more nurturing, shall we say.
Yeah, I'd go along with that, and that's a great way of using that platform. Actually, it also encourages a sense of ownership, doesn't it? When once those the people that chipped in and shared their opinion on what title it should be, by the time it gets released, they get that kind of, hey, that it's called that song because of me, or and that's nice.
That's true. It gets your audience involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can ask, which you can do the same thing with artwork. You say, hey guys, which cover art do you prefer? And then they'll set up a little thing where they can vote. And then you have votes from your audience on which cover is the right cover for the song.
Well, that's a very neat segue onto the next question, actually, Sarah, because I want to ask you about kind of the subject of kind of, at what point does branding an image become a component when developing an artist? Is it always something that comes after, the narrative and the message and the values are built and the songs are there, or is it something which is used early on as a nucleus to get the music direction, or does it vary? What's your opinion on when the right time is for that?
Yesterday.
Okay.
Time is like immediately. It's immediate. Nowadays, it's so immediate. I just really say day one. I think social media is just everything now. I mean, you can do so much with social media. I'm not as fond of TikTok, and that's just because I feel like it gets stupid a lot of the time. It encourages a lot of dumb stuff. But I know artists use it successfully, and that's a great tool. But of course, I understand how useful it can be. But I do tend to, I like Instagram, as I said. I do feel it's more nurturing, but I think it's, let me see, I made some notes here, I think it's the whole package. You really are so important that you have your sense of who you want to be. And that can change. I mean, look at the great ones, Bowie and Madonna, whatever. Their image was so clear from the get-go, and they didn't have social media. But whatever they could use, Bowie was a master of image, and Madonna always changing with the times. She always seemed to be a little ahead of the time, though she was just going down to the Lower East Side in New York City and checking out what everybody was wearing. But she was a master of knowing what was cool and hip a little bit before everybody knew it. So she was a master of image really from day one. And I think you have to do it, hopefully you can do it right away. If your image is nerdy and wear glasses and stuff, that's an image too,
Well, yeah. Well, that's you've used an interesting example there of Madonna, of kind of rushing down to Lower East Side. Right, what are people wearing, and right, that should therefore inform my approach as to what I look like next, or whatever. Perhaps the same could be said, therefore, for social media on a much more kind of amplified, magnified scale, or maybe even, I don't know, New York Fashion Week. Right, what are people wear? Again, that might be a bit abstract, right? But are the answers always in observation? Is there something? I can think of artists over the years that I've worked with that have had that kind of interesting quirk about them. Or let's take, for example, I don't know, Harry Styles, for example, when he started he's amazing, isn't he? On a multitude of levels, he's amazing.
Every way. Oh my God, he's the best.
But his style has also worked for him. It's endeared him to his audience because it's a bit different from what most young guys his age would be wearing, which you would have to say has been a successful element for him. I know it's more so about the music and all that kind of side of it, but his image has been very interesting. I mean, I didn't mean to focus the question around him exactly, but he's a good example as such.
Totally.
So it's.
I think the British have always been so great at this. Anyway, the Brits are just really have a sense of style. I love his image. He could do anything he wants. I mean, he wears skirts. I mean, he could do anything he wants. But he has such a cool image, for sure.
You've got to be brave, I think, with image, haven't you? If artists have to be brave at some point, go, right, do I feel a little bit silly wearing this? Well, if the answer is yes, it's probably going to look pretty good on stage, or at least be memorable. But there's many artists that we can think of that you go, well, because he or she wore that over there, that helped them to do this and do that over there, and there's certain outfits that people remember and go, oh wow, yeah, I associate that with this time or this era or whatever. But usually the most memorable things are the things that are out of the curve, right? That aren't fashionable at that particular time. But in this era, you're saying that has to be something which is ready now.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be extraordinary costuming, and you can go to thrift shops to buy stuff. There's so many thrift shops in England. Wow, I was there last year, and I couldn't believe the proliferation of thrift shops. You can find cool stuff inexpensively. I think just try to do something that amplifies who you are. It doesn't have to be crazy off the chart, but something that's more than just wearing a T-shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, again, wearing a T-shirt in a rock band is fine too. But I think just talking about branding also. Get a logo done. Mm-hmm. It's not that hard. You can even get the software for $100 or whatever that is, and 80 quid.
Yeah.
And you could have some kind of a logo, have some kind of a website. Maybe people don't look at websites that much, but it's useful to have, and it's not expensive to do it yourself.
Yeah.
There are AI programs that will help you make your own website. I think you just need to have it all. You need to have a website, and you need to be up on all social media platforms. Good to have a logo, because when you're performing, you got your name and some interesting letters. Good to have a banner when you're performing. When you get up on stage, people can see your name, and there's like a QR code if they want to give you a tip or something, or they want to look you up. Yeah. It's everything. You got to do it all.
Yeah. It's that kind of, in many ways, I kind of feel quite sorry for a lot of younger emerging artists in this day and age, because as good as they have it, and they, there's so many things that they have to be aware of, or that saying of how artists have to be multifaceted in this day and age, which to a certain extent is very, very, very true. However, it's a bit unfair in some ways that they have to be, because there's so many things that they have to know about, and it can be it can be quite overwhelming, I think, for a lot of young artists. Do you find that?
I think it's really overwhelming. I totally agree. I mean, I've known some artists, they're spending all their time either on doing covers or doing content, and they should really be performing and writing songs, but there's so much responsibility on their shoulders to take care of all those things. So it is a lot. I don't envy it at all. I mean, on one hand, I wish it was available to me when I was a young artist, because it would have been so much easier to put your stuff out and get feedback. But on the other hand, you're kind of working 24/7 on this, And if you're not, it's a problem, because you need to be, you've got to really be a workaholic on this project, on this music business thing.
Oh yeah, isn't that the truth? Okay, so final question, Sarah, and it's a big question, right? So there's a lot to this, I guess, in some ways. But what are the biggest mistakes that you notice emerging artists making? Are there any patterns in behaviour that you think, oh, this would be useful for people to avoid?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about sounding a little too much like other people. Is a problem. You got to really listen to your own self, and I think. You see all these bands that start to have success, or artists, and then whoever helped get them there, a shinier penny comes along and offers them stuff, and they ditch their people. And often it doesn't work out, or bands break up because they're going to be solo artists, because they're so good that it's like they believe their own publicity too much or something,
Yeah.
I think that is a problem. Because, even if you don't want to work with the people, or you don't think that the people that brought you to how far you got are the only people you should have in the mix, maybe keep them in the mix and bring in people that are, better connected or whatever, or in the right, geographic location. But I've seen that. Just trying to think, I think trying to listen to what's on the radio and trying to do that is a huge mistake. Because it took a year to get that on the radio, and you're already a year behind what's really happening if you're listening to what's on the radio and imitating, Good so point. I think that's just not a good idea either. Like, do your own thing. Don't copy what's happening now, because it's it's already moved on, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, good point. I think it's easy to overlook that sometimes. I mean, one of the things that I kind of sometimes battle with younger emerging artists, and this is nothing to do with the times we're in. It's always been a problem, but I think it's slightly more of a problem, I think, now, are when young artists want to start going, right, I want to send this to a record company, or I want to send this to a publisher, I want to reach out to managers, but there's no music out there yet. You know, there's no kind of presence, there's no web presence, there's no streams. You know, that kind of whole, you know, want to run before you can walk kind of thing, which the temptation to want to do that is there, because perhaps, you know, you have to do a lot more than, you know, package up a demo tape and post it and spend money. And, you know, it's like, it's one click away. You know, you can find the right person, quick DM on Instagram, bang, it's there. I've noticed that's become more of an issue because of that in recent years. I guess the answer is patience. Is this something that you witness?
I would say there is so much product out there. The odds are they're just not going to listen. I mean, you know, they can send out whatever they want to do, whatever they want to send. I think, as I've learned, if you're doing something that's really cool, people are going to come to you. That's just the way that works. I mean, with previous artists, when they're doing something cool and making noise and it sounds great and it's getting attention, I was getting a lot of emails and phone calls, you know?
Yeah.
And if you go with your hand out, it's just not usually going to work out because they're just not going to be interested.
Yeah.
I can't say don't try, because if you're 14, maybe people will be interested, you know, but for them, you know, because if you're really, really young, everyone loves a very young artist. But other than that, generally, no absolutes here, but more often than not, if you're not getting phone calls and emails because you're making a lot of noise and people are impressed, you're probably not going to get anything happen. Yeah. Or you're going to sign a really lousy deal.
Well, that as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of why I wrote the book, right? Is to help people to kind of figure out, right, what does this mean? What does that mean? Because on the one hand, right, we have the internet. Anyone can Google something or look on ChatGPT or whatever, but sometimes the results can be a minefield to try and navigate through. So that's a battle as well. Sarah, thank you so much for your insight and your kindness and your overall look at things. You know, it's really useful for everybody. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really fun. I got to get your book, and can't wait to hear what this sounds like. Let me know when it comes out.
The great Sarah Nagorny. Thank you, Sarah. Do you know, I think one of the things that is particularly inspiring about listening to Sarah is that all of the answers that she gave in this interview were musical answers. You know, she knows more than a thing or two about the music business. And of course, you know, strategy is important, and she more than alluded to that too. But if the music's right, other things start to work well. And that was an overriding message that came through in the essence of her thinking there. Let me just roll back and just play something that I thought was really important too.
If you're doing something that's really cool, people are going to come to you.
What a perfect note to finish on. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I wish you well. I will see you next time. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being in this community. May the force be with you.